not going to say something. I'm not going to say anything until somebody posts something. I wonder who it is. Too afraid to post. I'm not going to discuss the subject until somebody posts something, so I know who it is. Well, I wouldn't know who it is, would I? I'd know that somebody posted claiming to be some fake avatar. How long will it take before somebody works up the courage to post something? I think you are male. 2 people watching. Now, why would you be afraid to post something in the comments? Is it because you lack masculinity? Because you're somebody who's officially not supposed to subscribe to me, but doesn't want to make your identity known? That's also lacking in masculinity because you're hiding. And if you hide, it means you fear. And if you fear, then, well, what do you fear? After 5 minutes, nearly 6 minutes, 2 people posting, not saying anything, still watching. What's going to happen if you post? What do you fear? Yeah, I'm not going to start the subject until somebody posts in the chat. It can be something as boring as hi. I can occupy myself reading my Twitter notifications. Still nobody. Oh, hello, Howard. Hello. Hello, Gary. Now, of course, this is something that is of interest to all of you, being mostly men. I think I checked on my, what do you call it? What do you call it when Twitter when YouTube give you, analytics. They tell you, who listens to you, how many people listen to you, how much time they spend listening to you, where they are in which countries they are based, whether they are male or female. Howard says lack of masculinity in public life is caused by lack of men. Well, as far as I know, there are equal numbers of men and women in the world, apart from countries like China, because they committed abortion and infanticide because their only child they were allowed to have was not male. Now, it's probably true that men are afraid of women because men fear the malice of women, and also if they don't fear the malice of a particular woman, you know, they might even be in love with that woman, but then they fear that they might have their feelings hurt by this woman that they've taken a fancy to and might have fallen in love with. So fundamentally, they fear failure with women. Don't you guys? It would be terrible if you married a woman that you ended up hating, who divorced you and took you to the cleaners. It would be terrible, and therefore you wish to avoid such a situation, and therefore you don't marry. But then you are trapped, really. If you have children out of wedlock, then you don't have control over their upbringing, and the badly parented brats who are not a credit to you and may become criminals and serial killers, and you will be disgraced. In a way, we are all trapped because we seek status, and we know that status can be obtained by finding somebody decent to marry who will help us bring up the children of our marriage so they are not a disgrace to us. And for male-female pairings to be successful, we must consider the ingredients of a successful partnership. And it doesn't apply only to marriage. It also applies to business partnerships. So the best business partnerships are, well, you've got this thing that I can't do, and I have this thing that you can't do or don't have, and we enter into a partnership to do this thing that we both want to do. And so it is logical for people who want legitimate offspring to marry and stay together for the sake of the children. But along the way, a lot of basic ideas have been forgotten about the real purpose of marriage, which is to perpetuate the race, whatever our race, wherever our nation. And women are attracted to masculine men, and men are attracted by feminine women. It's always been the way, and we are programmed to do that because, well, it's common sense, isn't it? So if the minds of men and women who are marriageable and want to get married and want to marry for the sake of legitimate children, they would want, if they were being sensible, they would want their spouse to be a good spouse and a good parent to the children of the marriage that they intend to have. But what is femininity? I don't think we need to even consider what men want. I think what is most important is that men are men. Because once men are men, women will become women. It is a zero-sum game in that, if you think of there being two halves of something in a bowl, and you're the first one, and you take the, the thing that you want, it means that the second person coming after you would have to take the other thing. And it is meant to be the nature of men to take the initiative, to go and take the thing first, and not leave it to the women to go first. I know there's all this stuff about ladies first, but I'm not talking about, being nice to women. I'm talking about the basic instinct of a man. So even if a woman wanted to go first, well, the man would kind of beat her to it, being, taller, stronger, and all that. So it's only natural that a man, seeing two halves of something, would take the one that he prefers. And so men have to take the masculinity half, because it wouldn't work if they took the femininity half. So they're bound, I'm afraid, by dint of being men, to choose the masculine half of the whole. Fruit, I suppose you can call it, fruit in that bowl. And so, as I said many a time, it means taking the initiative. It means being resourceful, being creative, having a can-do attitude. Oh, Howard, I'm not saying I'm not saying you have to marry again. This would be, I think this would dismay, much younger people. But we're just talking about things in theory. We only talk about things in theory here, right? But we're talking about the cause of the moral and political and economic and social disease that the West is suffering from. We don't have to be marriageable ourselves to talk about being marriageable. We don't have to be men to say that, as women, we prefer men to be, like this or that, and men, not being women, will be perfectly entitled to say, well, we as men like women to be this, that, and the other. That we don't have to go through with it. I mean, obviously, it would be cruel to make people who don't want to marry. But we're just talking generally about the cause of the mental illness that we see all around us when we see people not making much sense. And by that I mean they say things that are ambiguous, nonsensical, contradictory, which means they may be lying or may be genuinely incoherent, which are signs of mental illness, are they not? So what causes this mental illness? It is what I call neurotic suspension. They want something, but they're afraid to get it. So think of this man looking at this bowl containing two halves of humanity. Of course, he should choose the masculine half, but maybe he's a bit afraid because vaguely he remembers some rule about ladies first, and the woman is watching him. He doesn't know quite what to do. He hesitates. People hesitate when they don't know what to do. Why is he hesitating? Well, perhaps he doesn't know which piece to choose, which half to choose, and perhaps he doesn't want to offend the woman by choosing the wrong half. But once he chooses correctly, everything will fall into place. And I'm just giving a bit of guidance here because I know people are confused and stupid and scared and basically need to be told about a lot of basic ideas. And the reason why there is so much mental health issues in the West is because the West lacks a religion, and if you don't have a religion, you won't know who you are. And this is fundamentally the cause of the problem. You need a consistent sense of identity as a group. First, the group has to have that identity, and then it will, and the sense of identity will cascade downwards to people below. I've come across that verse in the Quran, chapter 49, the verse 13, and it does state the obvious that, God created man and woman and tribes and nations. But nothing is obvious until it is pointed out, and um, this very obvious verse becomes crucially important to a civilization where men don't quite dare define a woman, and women don't quite dare define a woman either. So we are, in the very advanced stages of dementia and amnesia. And men, if they want to save their civilization, and there's no guarantee that they do, I understand that. Most of them are too old, they're too feeble, they're too stupid, they're too scared. They think, everything's over anyway for them, and they just want a quiet life. A quiet life. And this reminds me of somebody who's blocked me. Does one join? Does one become Muslim to have a quiet life? I don't think that's quite the right idea about becoming Muslim. There are certain duties to becoming Muslim. It's not just about avoiding pork and alcohol and gambling, is it? There's this duty to enjoin good and forbid evil. The religious obligation of jihad. And if you say that all you want is a quiet life as a Muslim, well, you join the wrong religion. You should be you should become Christian and just pray to Jesus, right? Pray to Jesus, believe that he's God, and then you'll get to heaven. How about that? Why not go back to being that kind of white person? Because if you become Muslim, this is your religious obligation. You have to pay, you have to give to charity, you have to pray 5 times, you have to avoid pork, all that sort of thing. And for Western Muslims, for Westerners thinking of becoming Muslim, I'm just saying don't bother. Just don't bother. You're not up to it. There's just something about the furniture of your mind, your internal intellectual landscape that just doesn't allow you to carry through with it. So don't bother. And if you think you'd like to try, then you can try with secular Quranism. You can try hypothesizing as a Muslim using the book of rules that you're supposed to believe comes from Allah. You have to be able to make arguments using the verses. Because there's no point becoming a Muslim in in the West if you're white, because it's like living as a foreigner in your country. How low status is that, huh? Very low status. But as a secular Quranist, you can have some dignity, right? You can still go to bars if you want. You can still do a lot of things without people going, hey, what are you, a Muslim, doing in this singles bar or this gay bar? Or eating pork ribs or bacon and ham sandwiches. Don't become Muslim. Take the intermediate step of becoming a secular Quranist and know the Quran well enough to make the arguments that I make as a social conservative who doesn't like LGBT, gay marriage, transgenderism, and use my arguments. What's your problem? Oh no, but you want a quiet life. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. Okay then, don't bother. Don't bother enjoining good or forbidding evil, because it's not for the likes of you. Just go back to praying to Jesus. So for some of these excuses are, well, allowed for, women, elderly, people of both sexes, you know, frightened men. No. Men have no excuse to be frightened. If they even show fear, you should mock them and, well, chase them to the ends of the earth and mock them for their cowardice. That's what you should do, so that they don't dare to be cowardly, right? So they won't dare to be that kind of Muslim that Rob Dufour is. He's so dumb. Do you know what he's done? In the controversy about the screening of The Lady of Heaven, he thought it would be a good idea to talk to his Sunni bros. He calls them his Sunni bros, right? Sunni bros. Don't even talk to the Sivnats and the Shias. He's so dumb. So he assumes that anyone who's white and Western would be converting to Sunni Islam just like him. Is he forbidding white North Americans from converting to Shia Islam? Does he want to get involved in that kind of stupid controversy? I don't think so, but he's too dumb to realize that. So dumb shit Dufour took sides and showed himself to be anti-Shia and anti-Sivnat. He calls Martin Daubney a Sivnat, which is pretty dumb. I mean, well, the British don't call themselves Sivnats, right? At least call them by what they call themselves. So let's look at Martin Daubney on Twitter, who was, saying how disgusting it was that these Muslims have prevented the screening of The Lady of Heaven in Cineworld. So, who is Martin Daubney? He's a former MEP. He's the deputy leader of the Reclaim Party. Does he call himself Sivnat? He has served as a Brexit Party member of the European Parliament. He's a former journalist and commentator. He was the longest serving editor of men's lifestyle magazine Loaded. We know what kind of magazine Loaded is, don't we, boys? Loaded is an online men's lifestyle magazine. It launched as a mass market print publication in 1994, which ceased being issued in March 2015, but launched as a digital magazine in 2015. The content has changed, with semi-clothed women now absent. So it was a bit of a lad mag. So Martin Daubney is, well, UKIP, and we know UKIP people don't like Muslims very much. So the Reclaim Party is a party of Lawrence Fox, with funding from Jeremy Hosking. But, it's basically for cool people, trendy people who, men who read men's magazines. But want to express some kind of resistance to immigration. And so Rob, in his wisdom, thought he'd, join the Muslims, well, the Sunnis, barking at Martin Daubney. I did ask him a question. I asked him, well, are you pleased? Are you pleased that your Sunni bros have successfully intimidated Cineworld into not screening The Lady of Heaven? And he hasn't responded. Maybe some of you might like to chase him up on it. He represents Islam for Europeans, right? I think he's a bit conflicted. I know he doesn't want to talk about secular Quranism with people like Ed Dutton, and he doesn't want to talk about secular Quranism with his Sunni bros, because he doesn't want to upset his Sunni bros. So his kind of masculinity is a bit, well, no, he utterly lacks masculinity. So Rob Duvall thinks he's gonna present an attractive image of Islam and Europeans who become Muslim by saying, come to me for your Muslim safe spaces, for your white Muslim safe spaces, because you see, if you become Muslim in the West, you're just going to be submerged in the immigrant culture, and it won't be fun for you because they'll basically kick you around and tell you off for every wrong thing you do because you're a convert. Just a moment. Where was I? Yes, the who. I have all the answers. But I keep getting really stupid questions. It would be nice to have the occasional intelligent question, but I I continue to wait. And lack of masculinity is also stupidity, and being scared, just really really repulsive. Women don't really say it. Maybe they don't articulate it. They just feel just generally discontented. All right, and I can understand. You just why should you why should you listen to anyone who's obviously stupider and poorer and more scared than you are? Why? It's just repellent. And not being able to reason properly. And the inability to reason properly is because you don't have principles. You really don't have them. You don't know you're supposed to have them. You don't know you're supposed to have them. This is fundamentally the problem of not having a functioning moral system. You literally don't have principles. And so people don't know how to behave. Well, anything goes. If the law changes, we have to obey the law. This is what people, before they had the idea of democracy worked under, it's the king. He's changed the laws. He's gonna punish us if we don't obey. So we better obey. It's all about, well, if we don't, we're gonna get punished. The reasoning of the cattle. And so you would have thought, we don't want to be cattle. How can we stop being cattle? Why don't we get ourselves some principles? That sort of thing. Obviously Christianity is not working. Believing in Christocrat doesn't get us anywhere. Because Christocrat was about putting people. Well, if you can get them to believe in the Christocrat, it would be, well, don't worry about the laws. Yeah, it's a bit unjust. Don't worry about it. Just carry on praying to Jesus, and you'll get to heaven. And then you can meet Jesus, and sing what does it? I don't know, but anyway, it's stupid, right? You would have thought in the day, in the time of the internet, people would just, take the idea out with the trash. But no, it's too big. It's too big a tradition for you to fight, right? What, 2,000 years of Christian history, right? You're not going to touch it. You're not going to challenge the Christocrat. Even when they have no arguments. It's do you ever have theological discussions with Christians? What do they say? Why'd you let them get away with it? Did you see how Hamza Yusuf was being so masculine as a Muslim, letting Jordan Peterson talk over him and ask his putridly stupid questions? I mean, I still can't get over it. Jordan, Who said you had to be a Jew and a Christian and a Muslim? Who told you that? I mean, Hamza Yusuf is, well, shit for guts. Well, that's where it all goes anyway, but really, Hamza Yusuf. And yeah, the people praising him. It's like, oh, Hamza Yusuf invited Jordan Peterson to Islam. Ooh, how brave. I mean, just look at his pale, round, weak face. I guess he was afraid of being tarred and feathered by the students at Berkeley. I guess. And I pointed it out before that Hamza Yusuf is a milk toast, and they still don't get it. But they're just happy. These white Muslim converts. It's like some other white Muslim convert who has some senior position in academia, said something to Jordan Peterson, who represents all these Islamophobes. Whoa, we're getting better now. But when you listen to it, you think, well, anyway, so the arguments need to be made, and I already know that white Muslim Americans are not up to the job, right? Somebody thinks, oh, I became Muslim to lead a quiet life. Why aren't I getting it? Go back to Christianity and pray to Jesus. Then you get your quiet life. Then it doesn't matter what stupid laws your government passes, telling you what you can and cannot say, whether you can even define a woman without going to jail. I don't know, it's just getting worse. But if you're scared, just go and pray to Jesus, right? Pray to Jesus and get a quiet life. Why don't you? But these cowards, they gather together, birds of a feather flock together. So apparently it's a good idea. It's a kind of, reverse Dawa. It's like, how can we make Islam more repellent to white people? Oh, we know, we're going to say, convert to Islam as a white person in the West, and we'll get you some safe spaces, right? Come on, join us in a quest for safe spaces. This is Rob DeFore of Islam for Europeans. So lack of masculinity, confused thinking, or just not getting the idea. You don't become Muslim to get a quiet life. And if you did, you're not getting the right idea. You don't buy yourself a sports car to drive slowly, right? You're just not getting the idea. And maybe it's just the whole Christian thing. It's like, oh, I just want to go to heaven, and therefore, um, it's about what you believe. And I'm saying, no, no, no. I don't care what you believe really, but I'm saying what you'd have to do as a political activist, and if you don't like the laws, you have to change the laws. And changing the laws is what political activism is. You either change individual laws or you change the whole system. And you begin by making arguments. You're saying something should be done, and the next step is how are you going to do it? You have to tell your people how you're going to do it. But I'm no further just talking to people who only who pretend not to get me. So they never, they never get to the next stage of, how are you going to do it? It'll be, oh, it ain't what you say. We don't like it. We don't want it. You can make us. And it is this corruption of the mind, of the intellect, is really what's making you all mentally ill. If you can't accept the truth as it is, if you can't accept that Christianity is idolatry, then I guess you suffer from a learning disability. If you, as a Muslim, don't get it that these Christians have been idolaters, worshipping a blasphemer, then I guess you're not going to obey chapter 18, verse 4, which commands you to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. So, well, I guess you're going to pick and mix your verses in the Quran that you're going to obey. And that has always been the problem, you see. All these Muslims, from the beginning, they picked and mixed. They had their own special selection of the verses that they liked, and they just ignored the ones that they didn't like and didn't want to do. And Rob Dufour is a problem because he should never have been allowed in positions of leadership, but I can imagine why he's there, because he's the only one willing to do it, and so that's why he's there. And once he's there, well, whatever he says goes, right? If he wants to present Islam for Europeans as this pathetic quest for a safe space, then I don't think there'll be any takers. And the way he brown noses the brown Muslims is, well, sad to see. And these brown Muslims are not going to respect you for. They won't. They don't anyway. They're just being polite, We have to be nice to all our Muslim bros and shit like that. I have to watch again his most recent video where the brown Muslim is actually saying, what was he saying? Can't remember now. We can listen to it together, just so you get an idea why I can't stand Rob Dufour. Listen, work. I guess Carol likes him because he deals with her needs. She always wanted a safe space, and she never got it. And there's Rob offering these safe spaces for Muslims. Come to me, I'll look after you. Who's going to go for that? Who's going to go for that? He wouldn't touch that shit large pole. And he cried, right? It's gone. It's gone. I can't find it. Because that guy guy disagreed with Rob. I can't remember. I think it was something to do with Daniel Huckyculture. I wish I'd remembered his name. It was very late and I was half asleep. So, okay, no, I'm wrong. It's only 35 minutes, so I can play it for you. And I will. You'll find it very dull, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going to show it to you and listen to it more carefully.
New York. Abdullah, you wanted to provide an example from the Sira, which kind of goes into what Chris was saying about building sodalities?
Yeah, obviously I'm not a theologian or a Islamic scientist or anything, but I feel like there's a specific example that something you reminded me of, Chris, when talking about this was when the Prophet ﷺ, when he was close to the end of his life, there's an authentic hadith that he specified that the next leader of the Muslims, whichever Khalifa comes next, needs to be from the tribe of Quraysh. Which a lot of the Muslims, they might read that and think that's strange because they came in thinking every I kept being preached to about how my race doesn't matter, about how I'm not basically we're all one. It's all based off faith and so on and so forth. So why would the Prophet say something like that? But you have to look at the wider cultural implication of the time, which was that the Prophet ﷺ, he recognized the reality that the Arabs at the time, basically the whole thing would have just fell apart if he before he had died, he had just went, okay, I guess you guys should just figure it out based off virtue and whoever's the best Muslim, and then he passed away. What do you think would have happened if he had said that? But rather, he acknowledged that the dominant tribe at the time, not just the dominant tribe, but those who would have most likely led continue to lead the Quraysh and all the Arabs at the time, needed to be from among them, because he acknowledged they weren't ready to transcend their cultural identity to such an extent that they could just look at any leader who was a Muslim from just any place. So that was not like him declaring that that Quraysh was superior or anything like that, which some might interpret it that way, and I think they're absolutely wrong. But rather, he was making a very strategic political and cultural decision by doing that. Now, when you look at that today, it's like we're not saying actually no, scratch that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is like when you have like the Salafi or Wahhabi types who want to eliminate race entirely, or some Muslim communities who don't identify with that but do that unintentionally, it's like you're taking someone who already had some kind of cultural identity, they accept Islam, which is already this massive change in their life, and you're basically saying, oh, you must eliminate basically all these aspects of your culture, in your history and who you are, and you just be this atom that's just floating in space that's not attached to anything. And that's like we went over this in the first segments. It's a very dangerous place to be in. So when someone hears what Chris is talking about, and instantly their brain defaults to the racism and isolation mindset, what really Chris is trying to get, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you need to base yourself in a kind of grounding which basically you protect yourself culturally and from an identity standpoint before you can get into the the transcendent form groups with other kinds of groups, and then that way we can have one big nation again. So yes.
Also an aspect of sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's pretty much a specificity. I mean, you can't be efficient and get things done if everything's melded as one together and there's no lines, right? You need lines to organize units, cells or units of anything, whether it's economic or social. You need divisions that serve the greater body. So in this case, the greater body is being the ummah. and it's described as a body, right? So it's pretty simple, but it doesn't make sense for the finger to be melded with the ear. It doesn't make any sense. There's separation, there's division, there's specificity. That way you can be more efficient in helping the whole. And that's the whole point of it. And that's like default, that's assumed. Like in the traditions and the Quran and Hadith, it's, I mean, again, I'm not a scholar, but it appears to be assumed that people are from a people, from a nation, or a qabila tribe, and that prophets were sent to, I mean, even the most, I guess you could say the most social constructivist academics or whatever that are in the field of language understand the necessity of specifying linguistic changes or languages or categorizing languages, right? Now, they may deny that on a biological level. I'm not very well versed in the social constructivist stuff. They may deny that on biological levels and gender and whatnot, but specificity is required. And so when I was talking to, just yesterday, I was talking to a Somali brother about this, and he said, this is common sense. You have to be specific to your people. It's the most efficient. You know how they speak, you know how they were raised, and it's even better if you're from the same geographical region or the same descent, a line of descent. It makes even more sense, but you have to be specific. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very specific. He was very specific about who he spoke to. He modified his language to speak the different in terms of dialects of how he spoke Arabic he modified it according to who he was speaking to. And he took into consideration the social standing, the lore, the history, the genealogy of the individuals or groups he was talking to. So this stuff is very common sense, but it sucks that we have to even explain it. But the bottom line is to get down to it, to do that networking. Because right now, it's a very interesting time right now. It's very open. Like we don't have a physical infrastructure. We don't have anything developed. So everything is like based on the word and character and personal relationships. It's very decentralized. And so that makes it kind of exciting, kind of fun. Like we're in a very special time right now. And if we do it properly, it can expand into actual infrastructure, actual buildings, brick and mortar, physical communities, villages, these kinds of things. But yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, all really good points. I mean, it's just a matter of time before people see the utility in this, and I think, the common narrative has kind of been built up by what the Muslim community sees as success when it comes to spreading Islam in the Anglosphere. And really, the only metric that they use is how many shahadas do we get, the number of shahadas in a month, that a particular dawah booth or mosque gets, or the number of, converts they see at Juma prayer. These are basically their metrics, right? Which, are really false metrics. I mean, when I hate to use the comparison, but Moneyball is a perfect example of this. For the longest time, before they had sabermetrics, the only measure of success was, the 5 tools of up and coming baseball players, hitting with power, running, and whatever, which, never wasn't even used in when they analyzed it from a computer standpoint. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that, many of these Islamic leaders who are mostly from born Muslim backgrounds, but even converts themselves, they will only be concentrating on the action phase of people taking their shahada and not looking at all the stuff that happens beforehand. Then converts, Westerners, from looking into Islam or converting to Islam in the first place. What happens after the shahada, which is all the societal problems that they have to deal with. Those are just kind of pushed off to the side, in favor of this kind of the action approach. And then, once they do convert to Islam, they use this kind of, like you said, the Medina solution, where it's like, let's just put all of our resources into assimilating the convert, which is totally unsustainable. And, if they can't just keep pouring money into this, have it keep not working, and then they just throw their hands up in the air and say, what else do we need to do? Because I've explained this model, this very simple model that, that Chris has stated, just should be common sense to the common Muslim, to convert very famous converts who have been Muslim for years, who have, quote unquote, made it, who have become like these celebrity imams, who have, done their ijaza, who have done years of research. and they look at me like I have 3 heads. Like, like, what are you talking about? This is going to divide the ummah. This is going to turn into a cult. And they just can't wrap their head around it. And maybe it comes from the idea that, they're trying, it comes off as racist because, they're thinking, okay, they're thinking that born Muslims in the West don't belong, that they're somehow less qualified to give dawah to the converts in these families. That's not what we're talking about here. Like for the, an imam, maybe he may be able to give a 20, 30-minute conversation to a convert's family member if they're willing. Most of the time they're not. And most of the time the convert doesn't want to exclaim their Islam publicly. And most of the time they want to meet at a mosque, which converts families aren't willing to do. But even if they, get around to having this 20, 30-minute conversation, that's just one 20-minute 30-minute conversation with an imam. Whereas the converts' families are being inundated with misinformation about Islam 24/7 after and before that conversation. So I don't understand how the traditional mosques are going to address this problem with the model that they're currently using. Abdullah?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, really think about it. Like let's say, for instance, that you're a white convert who accepts Islam, and then after many years you decide to completely forego your culture, your history, and everything, and you become, let's say, the model Muslim in the eyes of, say, the specific mosque that wants you to join not just Islam, but their culture and their identity. What utility are you going to serve to give dawah to see other white people who are like you, with by face and by name? You've completely become deracinated from your own culture, that you're unable to relate to them in any sort of meaningful way. I remember you had a discussion with Brother Smail Kamdar from I think Institute a really long time ago, and you spoke about, and he brought up this example about how he knew a guy who was a convert to Islam who's from a Zulu tribe, and then the person that went to give dawah to the Zulu tribe was him, because he's from that culture. He knows their different mental models and their framework, and how he can best persuade them in order to bring them to Islam. So Chris, you have any identical examples?
Well, at the top of my head, I mean, Islamic history is filled with it. I mean, it would have happened on a constant basis. I mean, people followed the religion of their chief, so it was a very collective process. I mean, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, may Allah be pleased with him. I mean, he was a chieftain of Aus, and he converted by basically telling his people, "I won't speak to any of you until you accept Islam," and they all accepted Islam collectively. That was the structure of the world then, and largely it's the same way now. I mean, people follow who they look up to. Nowadays, it's degenerate, like it's celebrities and musicians and actors, but it's natural for human beings to follow figureheads and to collectively act together in that following of that trend or that decision, right? It's a very organic process. And the thing with the Medina model is that part of what makes it so profound, its original emergence, is that the people are separate in their orientation and their what tribe they belong to. What makes it profound is the fact that they are distinct, right? That is what's profound about that unification. If they were all the same, it wouldn't have the same meaning, right? But when they all marched on Mecca to take Mecca at the end, they all had their tribal flags, right? But that was how profound it was, as they were all moving as thousands of people to retake the Kaaba, right? But it was under the banner of Islam. So if you don't have that differentiation, then that unity under the banner of faith, of Tawheed, is doesn't have the same meaning as it did when people read the Sirah, they read the Hadith, and they read about these inner rivalries and histories of conflict between people uniting. As the Aus and Khazraj is the prime example of that. They were at each other's throats for generations before Islam. But that differentiation under Islam adds to the beauty and the overall mosaic or the body of the Ummah. I'm just reiterating what I said before, but I just thought I'd articulate that.
Yeah, and also just an example from me personally is that I had a post on my Substack a while ago, which is basically a Q&A I had between a Muslim brother who's anonymous. I have no idea who he is, but he's a white convert to Islam. He had a few questions for me based off a lot of my previous posts, and about, you know, the realities of American Muslim life. And one of the things he asks was basically the Islamic stance, and say like, you know, he used the word eugenics, but I'm sure he meant it in a much more friendly way. And I said, obviously, we don't have racial segregation in Islam, or, you know, in terms of marriage and stuff like that, and, you know, procreation and stuff like that. However, and then I brought this up in the article, is that we have a certain reality today that, like, the vast majority of interracial marriages, and especially between, let's say, a convert to Islam and someone who's a Muslim from an entirely different culture, very often they fail. And they fail because both sides did not take into account a lot of things that, you know, we're talking about, you know, in this podcast, in which we've been talking about for like years now. And it's like, you know, when you look back at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were plenty of interracial marriages, for example. Obviously, it's halal. There's no exceptions that suddenly make it haram. But, you know, this was a time when these people, these Sahabis, were able to transcend their tribal animosities. And, you know, it was very easy for, you know, for example, the woman Sahabi, I forgot her name. She's Abyssinian, and the Prophet ﷺ married her to and this was a very easy thing, and they did it without second thought. You know, this was not a problem for them. But, you know, these were people whose iman was so strong that, you know, they were able to transcend those animosities and allegiances.
Still though, I mean, they were still living within the same general locale.
Yeah, so still, and, you know, I was going to bring this up, but they were still not only united by, you know, the city and the place that they were in, but they were also united by Islam, and that was their primary mode of identity. But today we don't have that luxury. You know, we don't have that same ability as they did to be like, oh yeah, I'm not going to enforce anything from my race whatsoever. But no, we have what we've been talking about for the past hour and a half, which that Muslims are like, yeah, I'm enforcing my culture and my identity and my you know, my views, but meanwhile I'm going to suppress yours because I don't think yours should be the one that flourishes at the moment.
The problem with this is, Abdullah, is that we have very little data on the subject, and even if we were to do a study on it, there's going to be several biases if we do that kind of research.
Yeah. It's right now. This is something that's, you know, very anecdotal, which for a lot of people, which, you know, it's not just anecdotal to me, but, you know, anecdotal from, like, you know, it's like a group anecdotal thing. But other than that, yeah, and, you know, after I wrote this article, there was a Salafi brother who, I mean, of course, he had the best intentions, and he brought me a lot of evidences and so on and so forth. And, you know, basically, it's like the same problem that I saw with so many others, is that you're not acknowledged. It's like you're technically correct with, like, the theology of it. It's absolutely halal to have, you know, for example, interracial marriages and so on and so forth, and this kind of mixing, but it's just not. And what I'm saying isn't that you shouldn't do it. You know, obviously, if you're a convert who finds himself very in love with and very compatible, you know, this is the main thing, compatibility with, you know, another born Muslim, absolutely go for it. What I'm saying is that you need to you know, have a second perspective of it, based off the reality that we're living in today. That you're actually, and that, you know, and you've been advocating for this, that you're actually much more likely to, you know, be compatible, say, if you're a white convert, with another white convert sister, for example.
Well, the thing is, that option isn't available. That's what people don't understand.
Yeah, it's also very tough.
If you're an Arab Christian, for example, who converts to Islam, which is very difficult. I'm not what they go through is extremely difficult. I mean, there's a lot of Islamophobia among Arab Christians, but at least when you convert to Islam, you have literally millions of people from the same culture that you could marry into. So the marriage pool is immediately there for you. Same thing with Hindu converts to Islam. There's literally millions of Desi brothers and sisters that have a similar culture than you do. But if you're a white convert to Islam, there's nothing. I mean, you have no marriage pool, basically no one with the same culture, and it's difficult to meet just another white convert of the same gender, let alone white convert of another gender. And then on top of that, you have the fact that you're dealing with not one but two sets of non-Muslim families. So, you know, and this is a talking point that Muslim da'is don't even recognize and bring up when they talk to ethno-nationalists. Like, this is a perfect point that Daniel could have brought up to when he debated Mark Collette. He could have said, look, the more white Britain hates on Islam, the worse it is for your demographic situation, because the white British who are interested in Islam and do convert to Islam, they get kicked out of their families' homes, they get written out of the wills, and then they have no choice but to marry into a Muslim family, because what white convert is going to want to marry another white convert and have to deal with two sets of Islamophobic families?
Yeah, and that's a big problem that Islam for Europeans is aiming to solve, right?
Yeah, or just bring it up. I mean, like,
or bring it into the big conversation so it can more easily be solved, and in the very far future.
and I hate to say him by name. I mean, I'm not here to backbite him. I mean, when I made my advice video to him, I tagged him and say, listen to this. It's my sincere advice.
Yeah, there's Daniel. Daniel does a lot of great work, and I admire Daniel because, well, first of all, he brought up loads of non-PC topics that the Muslim community just wasn't willing to talk about, and he brought them to light. And he's been largely responsible for that up until, I think, when he got banned from Twitter. But and he's obviously still posting on his website and on his YouTube channel. But he was like one of the original guys. But we have our disagreements with them, and you have yours.
I'll just leave it at that. But we're trying. He does his own thing. I do mine. But again, no, we'll leave it at that. I mean, in general, I would say, like you said, there's nothing wrong with interracial marriage. But my interview with Brother Ismail and other Islamic scholars said the same thing. That a lot of people don't realize is that it was the exception and not the rule. For the most part, you had kafah. 3 of the 4 madhabs, they advocate for the kafah system, and that all these factors should be taken into account. And what is mustahab, or recommended, is to marry your cultural match. But that isn't even an option, and that's why a lot of Westerners don't convert to Islam in the first place, because like you said, the institutions are there, including marriage networking. So
I mean, even in the event of it being permissible to marry another race, I don't have stats, but the common anecdotal situation is that most people simply marry within. I mean, even with it being permissible, legal, even in multicultural places, most people simply marry within. It's going to happen for the majority of the time. So, just how it is.
One more topic, this is kind of on the controversial side, but we shouldn't have, nothing should be controversial on our end, is that I guess in these discussions, with the European right, you get into some pretty controversial things. And I had my conversation with Duvid a couple of months ago, and I think that among the Bani Israel, I mean, there is, this would be a win. Islam for Europeans model be a win even for them, because we are Muslims and we strictly follow the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And at the end of the day, they are the people of the book. And I had Jewish friends at university who didn't have, either, the extreme leftist opinions of being incredibly anti-white, or extreme, pro-Israel opinions. They all have their own nuances, even among themselves. So, I mean, but when you get into these, discussions with, the European right, especially with these kind of trolls on Twitter, they say stuff that will seriously get you banned. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think, they would prefer to deal with us than the people on the European right. So, I don't know, should we just avoid that topic altogether, or do you think that it's just inevitable that it's going to come up? Like, I wanted to get a discussion going with Nuturi Carta, because I think at the end of the day, like our religions are very closely related, but I think that there are always going to be those who are going to be opposed to it. And I guess we have to stick to our principles. So do you guys have anything to add to that, without getting yourselves banned yourselves?
Yeah. Oh, Chris, you want to go first? Okay. Yeah. My position on dialogue with the European right has been pretty much the same for quite a while now, which is that I am willing to work with whoever is willing to work with us, to basically fight against the kind of mainstream narratives that hurt both of our groups, because there's a mutual allyship there, and I think that's very valuable. Obviously, there are huge segments of the European right that want nothing to do with Muslims or Islam or anything Oriental by any metric or mean, which I'm completely fine with that. I'm not going to scream Islamophobia if I want to have a dialogue with a certain big right-wing figure, and then they just bash me or think that I don't want anything to do with you. I don't care about that. I'm just willing to have a dialogue with anyone who's willing to provide a second perspective that will supplement ours, because I think a lot of the problems that a lot of Western Muslims face is because we went our own way. and we just continuously developed all of these errors, which just piled on, and just compiled into the big issues that we have today. So and I actually veer onto the side of actually associating with those who, even though they might not like Islam deep down, we just sort of mutual respect. It's a certain kind of Salah ad-Din versus King Richard kind of thing, where it's like we're obviously there's no violence or a violence or animosity that is like the dishonorable kind of like absolute hatred with no intellectual thought behind it whatsoever. But we're willing to acknowledge certain facts about each other, and how there's a big meme on the right for quite a while, which is Islam is right about women, which I'm not going to get it deep into that for obvious reasons. I'm not going to really show up like that, but it just shows that there's a lot of aspects of Islam that the European right respects, and there's a lot of aspects about the European right which Islam respects, and that doesn't require either of us to defile our cultures or our religions, but we still need to find that middle ground where we can come and have a dialogue and be able to find what helps both of us the most. And I don't mean that in a kind of like diversity inclusion type of way, but rather we must have this allyship in the moment, in the time that we're in, because it's very valuable. And if we don't, then I think we're going to be losing out on the lot.
So my take is that the Muslim worldview is firstly primarily theological, theocentric, so to speak. So say, whereas a nationalist wants to preserve the race, not only do we want to preserve the race, we want salvation for the race. And we want the race to worship the correct way and to worship their Lord. So there's a different context there. And there's a degree to where a non-believer can never understand that motivation. And they never will unless they accept Islam. So if we do become a sizable group, which inshallah we do eventually, I wouldn't be surprised if there's people on the right who are supportive of it and people on the right who despise it, see it as traitorous or something, like you're worshiping a foreign god or something like that. But as so long as we stick to the salvation of our people, Tawheed, the goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's all we focus on. The other material dimensions, increased birth rate, bigger extended families, tribal units of white people, again, that's secondary, and that will come with it. But the first is a Tawheed. So on that basis, because a lot of nationalists are materialists, they're Nietzschean kind of materialist people, at the end of the day, they won't relate to that or understand it. However, even among those people, those very materialist people, they can admire the metaphysical motivation of people. Even Bronze Age pervert, I heard a clip of him recently where he even mentioned Musa, Moses, and other figures about how they brought the zeal of God or the gods, a metaphysical motivation that put the social element second, but empowered and strengthened the social element, made them more fanatical, if you will. And he himself said that viewing religion as just social utility is bleak, and it really is. And so believers believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to see the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the motivation. And so if you are focused on that first and foremost, all of these social, genetic, biological, whatever things come into play, they fall into place, inshallah. And because it's an organic worldview, because Tawheed is the fitrah, it's natural, just by default, the social organization around that will be organic and normative, like normal for human history. Right?
There was a story from the Sirah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Meccan phase, where he was giving da'wah to various groups during Hajj season, and it was for the most part unsuccessful, except for the small tribe of Aus, which Khazraj, I think, which precipitated the hijrah to Medina. But he gave da'wah to I think a Persian leader, not the leader, but one of the leaders of Fars, right? And he said that if you convert to Islam, you will rule over Persia. And he couldn't believe it, so he ended up not embracing Islam. And as we know, after the Fath Mecca, the conquest of Mecca, Islam spread to Persia in great numbers, and it ended up becoming the dominant religion of the Saudi. That person actually ended up converting to Islam himself, but he never became a leader of Persia. So he must have regretted that.
And some of the fiercest Muslims, the most powerful Muslims, Muslim leaders, were staunch enemies prior. I mean, that's universal.
Mm-hmm.
The Persians, the Roman Arabs, the Turks, they were staunchly fighting the Muslims. They were savage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and those people ended up becoming the torchbearers of the deen, right? So the fact that, oh, how can you convert Europe when Europe has been at war with Islam for how long? That's even more powerful. That's even more that adds to it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it more profound.
Mm-hmm. So
alhamdulillah, a staunch anti-Muslim European converts, I have no doubt in my mind he'd be among some of the most passionate and zealous converts. That's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah. One last thing before we go, the last thing we want to do, and I, as a friend from Islam for Europeans, I have to walk a very, very fine line, and I never want to throw any of my Muslim brothers and sisters under the bus. Because there's so much stigma around this idea of us collectivizing. The way I look at the crisis in Europe of Muslims going there on I look at it as like a humanitarian issue, and there are several factors at play. One is that well, first of all, there's a lot of Muslim refugees in Muslim countries. So Turkey, Jordan, and they're really living on shoestring budgets. Like I was watching videos of Muslims living in refugee camps in Turkey, and it's very difficult for them to live there. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, aid them in those countries. The amount of funding that it takes, for one refugee in England, you could take that money and literally help an entire refugee camp, hundreds of Muslims, there's other metrics as well for, a lot of, sadly, some refugees have died en route to Europe, across the Mediterranean. And on top of that, it's a very difficult situation for them. And I mean, this is precipitated by the of the Muslim world. And I think many people on the European right, they recognize that. Others don't care, but at least there's a segment that agrees that this is a crisis that needs to be the best humanitarian approach. And if the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to question the Muslim Ummah about this, and I think the approach that Muslim organizations should take is to look at the dispassion and come to their own conclusions, because you can't just take a position these political issues and just take the exact opposite approach just because your enemies are taking the other approach. That's just not going to work. I mean, you just can't say, oh, I'm pro-abortion because people on the and the right wingers in America are anti-abortion. So when it comes to a hot button issue like this, I mean, again, I think as we move forward, like Chris said, Islam for Europeans should be apolitical. And I agree with that because, we have enough on our plate already. We're just trying to survive as converts. But my sincere recommendation to born Muslim communities and their organizations is to look at this data dispassionately and come to your own conclusions. Do you have anything to add to that, guys, or Abdullah?
Not really. You summed it up quite well. You're muted.
That's all I wanted to say about that. So I think this was really productive. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris, Abdullah. This was really a great thing. I know we talked about a lot of these things, when we were chatting, on social media as well, but it's good to really flesh them out, get them out to the public because, it's really important things that we need to know. I definitely, Abdullah, could you point out that book again, just so, we can recommend it?
It's called The Big Step by Mehdi Locke. How to survive Islam in the Anglosphere. It's a very short book, very straight to the point. I absolutely recommend it, not just to anyone who is converting to Islam or has converted to Islam, but really any Western Muslim who, even if you're a born Muslim, this is an extremely valuable book, and it really shatters a lot of myths and really not only that, but he actually goes over the history of how a lot of the Western Muslims are found themselves in the problems they are in today. with regards, not just mainstream narratives, but a lot of media manipulation, things like that. Yeah.
I'd love to have him on one day. Okay. Did you guys, Chris, Abdullah, did you have any, do you have like anything you'd like to promote, like a Twitter, like a handle, or you just want to leave it at that?
Yeah, sure. I write every day on Twitter and occasionally on my Substack. You can find me on Twitter at Abdullah Yusuf, just one word, and basically how my name is written, but instead of a B, it's a V. And I do have a novel coming out in June. Actually, it's a science fiction novel with Muslim /Islamic themes, which I'm very excited about, which has been my main project for the past 3 years now. And if anyone watching is interested in that, then I'm excited to show you what I have.
That sounds great. Yeah. Is the title to be announced, or?
It's called Blood of the Levant. It's going to be out I'm aiming to release it on Father's Day, because that's also somewhat related. But yeah, hopefully then.
Okay, may Allah give you success in that endeavor, Abdullah. Chris, anything you'd like to promote, or just giving your 2 cents here?
Oh yeah, I just started a new page, an affiliate page to Islam for Europeans. It's called White Muslim Unity. That's the @ is WM_nation. So check that out. It's a new profile. Just started posting recently, so that's all.
Okay, great. Okay, I guess we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening to us. I'm Robert from Islam for Europeans. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all the Muslims safe and successful, both all around the world, the Muslim world and the West as well. And yeah, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, guys, and take
Still 6 of you here. Thank you for staying the course, particularly when Rob is so dull. But I think this Abdullah guy is promising. I've tweeted him to ask him if Rob ever mentioned secular Quranism to him. My suspicion is that he didn't, and of course he wouldn't, because he doesn't want to be controversial, because he thinks Islam for Europeans should be apolitical, as he says. That's just how clueless Rob is. How utterly clueless. And you see how he conducts these debates. He lets dullest person come on to waste time talking his incomprehensible waffle. Abdullah is interesting because he's got a book to sell. He's young. He actually wants to talk to nationalists. He actually said that. And Rob closed him down by saying, well, what did he say? Walking a fine line. That's his favorite term. We'll leave it at that. No, I'm not leaving it at that. Did you see Rob? Well, on my channel, I think it was last week, when he said he read his speech, and I wouldn't engage on a, dialogue level. Because, he has no arguments. He has no arguments because, well, he's not really the smartest political operator around. Because I am, obviously. But yeah, follow us on Twitter. You'll have fun. Because all these arguments are easily made. They're not being made because I haven't been able to engage with anyone prepared to engage with me, capable of even taking my points. Yeah, Rob looks like he should be sitting. Oh, I don't know. I don't know where he should be sitting. Yes, he's some sort of musical, artistic person, or if not, some kind of clerk. Anyway, I can't stand him. Because I can't stand cowards. And it's not like I'm asking him to, risk his life or anything. He could be just saying, well, secular Quranism is this idea by this woman. What do you think? He could just have done that without, I don't expect people to agree with me, because even if you don't agree with me, you can, well, at least be prepared to challenge my ideas. Rob Dufour is, well, he's Canadian, so technically he's British. I think Canadian men on the whole lack masculinity, but then so do British men. American men have a bit more masculinity because, they have a different history. At least they kicked out George III. They fought for their freedom, but not really the British. It's probably bred into them to, believe in nonsense. And that they're never ever going to win if they say anything, or if they want to say anything, they'll say it in the stupidest way, and then they'll end up in prison where they just blame the Jews. Nationalism divides the Ummah, says John. I disagree. It doesn't have to be this way, because if you accept my definition of nationalism, which is government in the national interest, well, why would it divide anyone? Everyone in the world, even with diametrically opposed national interests, would agree that their government should govern in the national interest. If not, whose? See, John T. says, I would not say nationalism and Islam are mutually exclusive, but they are at least independent. I don't know what you're really trying to say. I'm saying it's in the interest, it's in the national interest of any country, of any Western country, to adopt secular Quranism. That's what I'm saying, okay? And if you disagree with me, then tell me why. So I don't know what John T is trying to say. You cannot control 1.4 billion people with identity politics. Nationalism and independent thought that it disagrees with the dogma is not even grammatical. I don't know what the hell you're trying to say. I'm not trying to control 1.4 billion people. I'm just talking about the country that you live in. If you live under a government, you want your government to govern in a national interest. That's all, right? That's all I'm saying. Why is that so hard to understand? Why is that so controversial? And I'm saying, if your society is a degenerate matriarchy, then it would be in the national interest to restore the patriarchy. Is that hard to understand? I don't care about the 1.4 billion people. Peter North the Legend says Sam Samuels surely isn't a coward. No, he's not. He's he is actually a masculine man, a masculine man, the most masculine of all the men I've met online. And well, it's refreshing. Very refreshing indeed. I don't even have to agree with him. I don't even have to agree with him to appreciate the kind of masculinity that he exudes. He's able to admit it when he's wrong, but if he's certain, he will act as if he's certain. There is movement, there is engagement. You can have a conversation with him. He's not, somebody reading a script like Rob Dufour. John says Islam is a bad choice for English nationalism because of Christian identity. I'm saying Christianity is kaput. I think you know me to have said that repeatedly and clearly. I don't think I guess you're some Muslim pretending to be non-Muslim because of your name, right? I mean, why do you do that? And you pretend to be French. It's just a sort of mongrel identity. Islam is a bad choice for English nationalism. There's nothing about being English that says you can't be another religion other than Christianity, particularly when Christianity is kaput. So it's too bad if they don't like it. They don't have to like it. It's not a requirement for them to like it. So to sum up, well, it doesn't look like English is your first language, English American person. You don't make much sense. I know you're trying to say something and you think it's important, but, look at your grammar. I am an Christian English American. It makes no sense, but, I guess most people are mentally ill, and this stream is about mental illness caused by lack of masculinity. So I don't know when men are ever going to step up to the plate or even accept that they need a religion in order to, be what they're meant to be, i.e., masculine men. All right. I'll try to sum up what I thought I said. Self-loathing is a form of mental illness. Of course, we shouldn't hate ourselves. We should at least respect ourselves, but we hate ourselves if we if you know our government is corrupt and incompetent and evil, and the people who wish to challenge the government are equally, if not more, incompetent and evil, and when you want to talk about ideas with people, they're not able to discuss it, even though they have been to university and have degrees like philosophy and history and politics and English. They don't get what you're trying to say to them, and then you suspect they're pretending not to get it because they want to avoid obeying their moral imperative. The moral imperative is basically logic plus truth plus morality. So if you don't at least want to claim to be honest and reasonable and moral, then I guess you have no moral imperative to obey. So if you are a moral being and you know that something important as your religion is failing, then you ought to do something about it, and at least you ought to be able to discuss it. And I see no signs, all I see are just, anonymous avatars. And then you meet somebody like Rob Dufour, who isn't an anonymous avatar, but then he's just so stupid and timorous. And, well, stupid and scared and talking shit. But it appeals to, women like Carol, because he's saying, oh, come to me for your safe spaces. So he's pandering to, well, I guess a certain demographic who don't mind being identified as being scared and marginalized, people living in their own country, not ashamed to admit that they are marginalized and living like a foreigner in their own country. Then you go to Rob, and Rob wouldn't be able to make the arguments in favor of Sharia or secular Quranism because he's waiting for enough people to make his country Muslim majority before he will even raise the subject. So, I don't know. I don't want to be seen as some kind of usurper, but, I'm not European, but, secular Quranism is Islam for Europeans. Not Rob's warmed up vomit of safe spaces. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you for listening.